This is the Power Producers Podcast, where we are refining and redefining the sales game.
Rule number one is you have to believe in yourself. You're the only one who doesn't think you belong in this appointment. The prospect has already validated your existence by scheduling time with you. Get it through your head you belong here, go in there, crush it, and close the deal.
A place where sales professionals can come to learn from other sales professionals and thought leaders that have mastered their craft.
The difference between a good salesperson and a best-in-class salesperson is only 2 minutes. By spending an extra 2 minutes on what you might think is a mundane task in the sales game, you separate yourselves from the pack, you grow your book of business, you close more deals, and you retain your accounts.
As well as their peers who are still striving for perfection to achieve their why.
I have a wife and 4 kids. Failure is not an option.
Real sales professionals, real stories, real results.
It's no different than being a professional baseball player. You can't be a one-trick pony. You have to be a 5-tool player in order to succeed in this game.
This is the Power Producers Podcast, production redefined. Are you ready to feel the power?
Hey everybody, I have got Mr. Walt Goshert with us today. It's actually a very special day at the Power Producers Podcast because we have a brand new baby in the mix. Mr. Kyle Hauk, my co-host, is out because his wife had their baby boy, their first, at 3 o'clock this morning. I know because I was awake. You would think it was my grandchild, but not so much. Baby and mom seem to be doing really well, and I wish them well. But we have Mr. Walt Goshert with us today, and we are going to talk about a variety of things, but I think that a lot of agents out there can learn a lot from some of the proper techniques that you can use on LinkedIn, and I know that I can too. I probably, like everything else, just need to do more about what I know instead of winging it. But Walt, glad to have you, man. Why don't you tell everybody a little bit about who you are, where you came from, and how you got to where you're at?
Okay. Hey, great to be here, and congratulations to Kyle. That's great news. So, yeah, you always like to hear that kind of stuff. So, cool. Short story. I've been in the insurance business for 40 years. Started my career with Aetna before they were Travelers on the commercial insurance side. Went to the brokerage side for 10 years. Built a book of business and put together the first work comp safety group in Colorado. And that was through the state fund. It was a huge headache at the time, but it actually worked. And sold my book of business and joined CPA, registered investment advisor friend of mine, and helped him to build his book of business. And for the last 20 years, I've been an independent marketing consultant, working mostly with B2B clients, and most recently back to working with commercial insurance people.
Cool deal. So that's interesting that you left insurance to get into marketing. It's funny because I was talking with somebody on the phone today, and I self-admittedly told them I'm actually more of a marketer than I am an insurance agent. But it probably makes me dangerous because I'm pretty solid as an insurance agent too. But marketing's passion, right? It's something that I like to do, and insurance. I like to help people. I like to do insurance, but my real passion is the marketing piece and taking an idea that I have for something that's sort of off the wall or whatever, and then turning it into fruition. That's sort of been my MO my whole life, for that matter. So, but you're heavy. Talk a little bit about that. I mean, are you dealing with marketing outside of social stuff, or are you primarily LinkedIn? Because you and I have originally connected on LinkedIn, and
right.
From what I can see, that's a lot of what you do. But I mean, what's the gamut?
Yeah, I like to say I'm platform agnostic. Whatever works, whatever pieces. I think LinkedIn is a great opportunity. I tend to focus on that, and just to reflect on what you're saying. I've always been attracted to the marketing part of it. When I got in the insurance business, I found the insurance kind of easy to understand, but I found it boring too. I was never really a big technician. I liked, just like you're saying, I like the creative process of taking someone that you just didn't know, a stranger, and turning them into someone that where they trusted you to be their advisor. I found that a fascinating process, and I still find it fascinating how you build those relationships. And a lot of that is marketing. And I think the whole prospecting piece of what we've done traditionally in insurance has evolved into more of a marketing type of discipline, especially with all the online opportunities that are out there. It used to be you could just, pick up a list, cold call people, or go out and meet people, where now I think you really have to be more of a marketer to build relationships and have those opportunities. So
yeah, no, I agree with you. And I think it's interesting because, your point's well taken that you have to be a marketer to initiate and build those relationships. You also have to be a marketer, even though it doesn't seem like you're being a marketer, to create a raving fan once you have somebody in your book of business.
Absolutely.
Because you obviously want to get referrals around that account or whatever else. And that's one of the things that we preach and we try and execute in my firm, is to create that awesome client experience from the second that they get the first video welcome from me, welcome to the family, we're glad to have you, to the welcome kit that they get in the mail from us with branded things and all kinds of cool little swag that we give them, to the fact that we can execute on the basics. The problem is the basics aren't going to cut it for people anymore.
Yeah.
The basics are the status quo. That's what the expectation is.
Well, it's that whole commodity agent trap. And I know that's something that, I don't know if you're a fan of Scott Addis and what he's done, but he talks a lot about that commodity agent trap, where, and this is especially true when you look on LinkedIn, every 99% of the agents or producers out there, they look and sound the same. And so you need to be positioned differently to be able to break through that commodity agent trap and to break through all the noise that's happening online to grab people's attention. So you have the opportunities to start to build a relationship and ultimately land them as a client.
Yeah, I agree. I know Scott well, actually. And you're right. I say it differently than what Scott does. I typically tell people that I view the insurance transaction is being a commoditized shuffling of paperwork. That's really what it is.
Yeah, it is.
At the end of the day, it's a policy. It's a binder that sits behind your desk and collects dust. It's a certificate that gets you onto a job site. Does it have any intrinsic value? No, not really. Unless you have a claim and it needs to respond, then it's of value to you. Otherwise, people pay money in and out all year long and never get anything from it. And so it just becomes a cost of doing business in most decision makers' eyes. That's dangerous that we've created that environment because it removes value completely.
Yeah, the intrinsic value is what insights and advice, recommendations that producer or the advisor, the agent, whatever label we want to put on the person, what are they adding of value to the transaction? Where we're really trying to position in the same level as that business's CPA, their attorney, where you're really on that same level, where they're looking to you to make proactive decisions rather than just saying, geez, I bought a building. How much insurance do I need? Where they're calling you at the time they're thinking about expanding operations or buying that new building and saying, hey, David, how is this going to impact my insurance? And how does this impact part of my operations and other facets? I like your insights, your take on this.
Yeah, I agree. And, truth be told, if you have the best relationship with them, they're going to call you before they ever start looking.
Yeah. And that's what you want.
It's not going to be a situation where it's, hey, but unfortunately, that is what we have trained our prospects and clients to think about, right? I think that we've created that environment. Nobody else is to blame. And, agents, by and large, the example you gave is the same thing that you hear literally every single time that somebody talks about how an agent wants to be perceived. We want to be perceived like the attorney or the accountant because those people seem to be respected, trusted advisors. What are we doing in our interactions and relationships with people to allow us to be perceived on that level. And if, in my opinion, not enough, because too many people still don't view us that way.
Yeah, I think I think there's a lot of reasons for it. I think, not to point fingers, but I think the carriers somewhat encourage it. And I think the clients become comfortable with it, because they default to just comparing on a price basis instead of really valuing the insights, the recommendations, the advice that producer can bring to the table. But I think you're right. I think it starts with us as the producers. We have to be the ones that step up and initiate that relationship and create the value. And a lot of this is perception of value. That's marketing. How do you perceive that there's a value there, that the client's going to put a value on it, and it makes a difference for their business?
Well, it's interesting because in Florida, and I talk about this a lot. I don't think that I've necessarily talked about it on the podcast as much as I do when I speak in groups, but it's automatically commoditized in the workers' comp market in Florida because it's state administered pricing, right? There is no competitive advantage from one carrier to the next. Yes, somebody might be able to give you a better dividend. Somebody may be able to give you a better structured retro program or whatever else. But for all practical purposes, it's the same price. It's the same commodity. And a lot of agents, in my opinion, throw their hands up and just say, comp's the comp. We're not even going to try and compete on this or we're not going to put as much effort into this because there's really nothing we can do to change the price. We're going to go focus on really driving down your auto rates. Well, here's a fun fact. How do you know that the auto isn't going to be just as bad as the comp? And the reason the comp's bad is because they had auto accidents. So you're focusing, when you focus on a price game instead of total cost of risk, you're doing a disservice to yourself and you're doing a disservice to your client. That's why when we deal with workers' comp, especially, me personally, 100% of the time, it's an experience modification analysis. I go in with the XMOD analysis, and we look at exactly what the root causes are. There's no way for me to tell somebody how I'm going to give them a treatment plan for issues on their account until I've done a credible and thorough diagnosis. A lot of agents don't do that because they're not willing to stop talking long enough to listen, and they're not willing to go the extra mile to actually invest in learning and understanding something that will be a huge point of differentiation for them. They look at it at surface level and say, comp's the comp. The state tells us what it's going to be. I'm going to move on to the next thing. And that has made me a very relatively successul producer from that standpoint because I go where they don't.
Yeah, I think it's funny you talk about comp, the comp, and we just compare it on price. But I think the comp is where you have the biggest opportunity to make a difference in the advice, the insights, the recommendations that you can bring to the discussion. And it's usually the biggest price driver in a lot of the businesses, whether it's a construction firm, manufacturing firm, warehousing firm, health services, the comp drives that P&C premium. And there's a lot of things, the price being the price, but their ultimate cost of what they're going to pay is based upon how well you recommend and how much you actually help them to implement those safety procedures, the claims management procedures, understanding and pulling apart their experience mod, all those things that go into that. It kind of is surprising to me that more agents don't take advantage of that. I don't know if they're lazy or they just don't understand it. I don't know because, that's how I built my business too when I was a producer. And it just seemed to me to make sense to do that, to go in and really advise the client on, hey, this is one of your biggest business expenses. Let's see how we can make some inroads in what you're paying here and not just accept that the rate's the rate.
Yeah. Understanding my peer group, what I would tell you is it's twofold. Number one, they don't want to have to do any more than they absolutely have to get the deal done. So
so that's laziness.
The sharpening of the saw and the unwillingness to learn something and push your comfort level and the boundaries to learn that is one thing. And the other thing is the money, right? Yeah. So even though the comp might be higher premium,
you make less commission on it.
It's less commission, and that's what they look at. And so I'm a firm believer in, I'd rather have 100% of 8%, than 100% of nothing. So,
Well,
and we lead with the comp, then we go take everything anyhow.
Well, you lead with the
in
comp, and you never write just the comp. I always, was a part of the deal is, hey, if I'm going to help you on your comp, I need everything on your business. I can't really advise you on just your comp alone when we're talking about your property, your liability, your autos, everything. I need to work with you on everything.
Yeah, I agree. And when we work with somebody, we put together a service plan for them as far as what we're going to give them in terms of deliverables, right? So there's a lot of low-hanging fruit. I could take a producer that is fresh out of insurance school, getting their license, and I can make them successful in workers' comp production very, very quickly. One of the first things that I tell them to do is, if you ever have the opportunity, which it's rare that you're going to have it, like if you go to do a marketing drop or whatever, but if you're in a meeting and that person has their loss runs because they have an issue, they say, here, take a look at these. What do you think? A lot of people are going to have a deer in the headlights look. They're not going to understand what they're looking at. It's like, holy cow. And this is your chance, right? This is your chance to shine. And I tell them all the time, move over to that indemnity column and look straight down the column. Yeah. What does that look like? And if you've got claims that are, $200 or $300 of indemnity, you need to question why. Why did this happen? What kind of advice did you get? Who allowed that indemnity to be on this claim because of how it affects your experience mod, right? Mm-hmm. If that indemnity is not on there, you get the 70% reduction up to the split point, depending on what your state laws are. But the second you throw that indemnity on, 100% of the claim value goes into the mod calculation, and you screw yourself. And so I tell them all the time, if you look at that, you need to look for low dollar indemnity claims. Everybody's going to have a shock loss at some point, more than likely. But if you have the low dollar stuff, that's a 100% red flag that there is no light duty or return to work program in this organization. And then you ask that question. Well, it looks to me like you have a lot of low dollar indemnity claims. Talk to me a little bit about your return to work program. Everybody has one, right? Yeah. They all have return to work. Just ask them. They're going to tell you, because I learned probably 10 years ago that when they say, oh, yeah, we have return to work, I just keep talking because I know they don't have it. Yeah. And basically what I do is I say, well, tell me a little bit about your return to work. Oh, yeah, we have that under control. Oh, so to help me understand a little bit better, you have gone and met with the treating facility and established a relationship with the treating physician to let them know that you are a return to work light duty employer who values your people and wants to bring them back so that they're assimilated into the culture as quickly as possible. And you have positions that are dedicated to bring those people back as quickly as possible. And you have the information that comes back from the doctor that clearly shows you limitations and everything else. And you have a procedure set up for how you take that information in your organization and process it. And you also have that letter that goes to the employee that offers them the light duty position and explains that it's incumbent on them to communicate what doctor's appointments they have. You give them the wage that you're going to give them for the jobs that you're offering them. You name who their supervisor is. You tell them what their tentative schedule is going to be, and you give them the opportunity to accept or reject that. And you send that to them via email and U.S. mail and give them a deadline to get it back to you. So you have that as well. And then you've identified, and I just go down the gamut because I know they don't have it. Yeah. Right. No, if they had that, those low dollar indemnity claims are nowhere on the mod.
Well, it's usually a case of, they need to experience a big claim to get that grabs their attention first, where it really impacts their mod. Then they get religion about having a return to work program. But if they haven't experienced that, or they think it was outside of their control, then they just let it slide is the problem. Because it takes it takes leadership within the business to do that. They have to be very process oriented and have systems in their business. And then they have to be able to communicate that out to their staff. And that takes some leadership in the business.
But let's face it, we're talking about middle market accounts, right? Yeah. How many middle market accounts? And when I define middle market, I look at my personal book of business. I focus on things between $25,000 and $50,000 in agency revenue. So if you're using 10%, $250,000 to $500,000 in premium is what I look at. How many of those people actually have a dedicated resource internally for risk management?
They don't. They don't. It's usually dumped on the CFO's plate, and the guy's balancing 101 different things. He's trying to get funding. He's trying to balance the taxes and minimize the taxes within the business. They're talking about accounting systems so they can monitor what's going on from a cash flow standpoint in the business. Usually, the last thing on his plate is risk management. It's
Agreed.
That's just the way it is. That's the reality of how CFOs work in those middle market businesses.
Well, and the fact of the matter is, take that a step further. Okay, the last thing on his plate's risk management, but what is his view of risk management? What does that actually mean to him? That, in the average middle market CFO's mind, is insurance renewal. Yeah. That's it. Like, there is no proactive stuff going on. And so it's interesting because when we do the mod analysis, we use that to set the table because, number one, I know that there's a 95% chance nobody else has ever done this for them. But number two, we go in and we lay it out for them, right? So that when we put that report together, we can show them by injury type, by body part injured, by cause of injury, by employee, how many mod points each one of those things has attributed to it, and subsequently how much premium they're paying as a result of those things over 1 year and over the 3-year mod period, just because they're on the mod. But the other thing that it does is if you do one of those analyses right, which I don't like the way that a lot of the software companies tell you to do it because they don't have you break out the grouped losses. I key every loss in individually. And the reason why I do that is I want to see that if there's 3 meta-only claims that fall below the threshold of what's grouped and what's not, I want to see that there's 3 lacerations on somebody's right hand because I want to go find out what part of the operation they're working in. Is there a guarding issue? Is the workstation not set up properly? Is it a training issue? Because we know frequency breeds severity, and it's only a matter of time till somebody loses their whole flipping hand.
And those, sometimes you can pinpoint very easily preventable losses when you go into that kind of level of detail. And it's sometimes it's a training issue, a safety training issue. You can really get at the root cause of what's causing those losses. And you're right, David. Very few agents know how to lead that conversation, and likely that's a conversation that CFO has never had with his agent.
No, and it's crazy. People ask me all the time, how are you able to produce business easily in the middle market? Well, it's simple. People either look at me like they've never had the conversation before and they buy into what I say, or they look at me like I have an eyeball in the middle of my forehead and I'm absolutely nuts. If that's how they look at me, then they're probably not going to be a good client. They're not going to be a good client for me anyhow. But, to your point of what you said earlier, again, I think it goes back also to insurance agents, by and large, are viewed as salespeople. They're not viewed as trusted advisors. They're selling a product. They're not solving a problem. And I open every one of the meetings that I have with somebody with, listen, I understand what my industry reputation is. If you've noticed, my company name is Florida Risk Partners. Insurance is nowhere in the name of my company, and that's by design. We view insurance as a commoditized shuffling of paperwork. We're really here to talk to you about what's ultimately driving the total cost of risk in your organization. Certainly premiums are part of that, but there's so much more that we need to talk about today. And then we begin to dive into those things, and the mod is certainly one of them, but the other one that nobody ever talks about, which, by the way, guys, you're getting pure gold right now. If you're an agent listening to this, you are getting pure gold, and you have a choice. You can either listen to what I'm telling you and go try and implement it, or you can ignore it, and guys like me are going to still run over you like a truck when you were in the marketplace. Yeah. But the bottom line is they don't talk about total cost of risk. And there's a I want to say it's the statistic is from the Bureau of Labor Statistics that the indirect costs of any claim across general industry is anywhere between 2 and 20 times the direct cost of a claim.
The hidden costs of the administrative costs, the lost time, people who need, the witnesses who need to fill out all the paperwork involved, everything that goes along with all those hidden costs, when it's just not the dollar amounts that are paid out of the insurance, but it's a disruption to the operation when there's a claim in an operation. And I've seen this as a producer myself when there have been major claims, whether it was a major injury or an auto accident or a fire or whatever, we're in this shutdown phase, but that temporarily, normally when there's a major claim, it shuts down the business for a period of time. Or even worse is a lawsuit that stretches out and distracts and takes away the focus of the business for years.
Listen, we could do a whole podcast for an hour time and just continuously name off indirect costs, overtime, cost to retrain and rehire, recruiting costs. I mean, like you could go in, or if you're in manufacturing, God forbid, somebody gets their hand stuck in a piece of equipment, you have to shut that whole work center down. How much does that cost you? But it's interesting because the average CFO does not buy that statistic, right? Because nobody has ever talked to them about that before. So when we go in and we lay out a case for them about here's what your loss runs look like, here's where your experience mod is, but it's really important for you to understand that the indirect costs that you have associated with, according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, are anywhere between 2 and 20 times the direct cost of the claim. And inevitably, they're going to look at their claims and they're going to say, well, I had $500,000 worth of claims this year. You're telling me that my indirect costs are $1 million. I would certainly notice if $1 million was leaving my financial statements. And I said, well, that's what the Bureau of Labor Statistics says, and it should be relatively credible. It's across general industry. And we chose the number 2 because we didn't think you'd believe 20. So there's no way that let me rephrase this. The argument you're trying to get me to believe is that you're so bad in workers' comp that your experience mod's a 2.2, but you're best in class at containing the soft cost of claims. That's what you're asking me to accept.
That just doesn't make any logical sense if someone gives you that kind of response, because that's not true.
That's the moment every time. Yeah. I get to that place when I go into a new business appointment. I get to that point as quickly as I can, because I know at that point that if they hear that and they listen to what I say and I come back with that exact argument that I just made, that the light bulb goes off and the rest of the conversation, I have them as a captive audience.
Yeah. I think it's a case of, we're maybe going beyond the marketing and prospecting part, but it's, this whole qualification and getting the potential client to, I guess, open their eyes to what's reality. I think that's a big part of it. And you mentioned it, David, the faster you can get them to that point, the quicker you can get the broker record letter and move on to start to serve that client, instead of just dancing around all the other stuff that we do as agents to, do quotes and jam up your staff, jam up your carriers. That just doesn't make any sense to be operating your business like that. You want to be able to get in there and help your client and make a difference for your client as quickly as possible.
Yeah, I agree. And I mean, the thing is, you have to get to that point early in the conversation. But, if you listen to what I've said, and if you were in any new business appointment, number one, I follow pretty much the same script almost every time. It may be some different questions here or there. But, at the end of the day, you haven't heard me say a word about insurance or premium.
Yeah, it's not about that.
Not at all. So we go in and we talk about, here's your mod analysis. This is the diagnosis. Let's talk about the treatment plan. Let's talk about light duty. Looks to me like you've got some back injuries. We need to come in and retrain your staff on manual material handling. We might have some guarding issues. Looks like a couple of people had something get in their eye. Let's talk about personal protective equipment. Get into all of the things that could be driving those costs. And then when we get to that point, I'm typically past 30 minutes, usually 45 minutes in before I ever mention insurance. And the conversation comes, look, I know that we've talked about this. Can you agree with me that this makes sense? And I get them to buy into that. Can you agree with me that your company needs to take action on these things? Can you agree with me that I would be the right person to do that for you? And then I say, listen, you're probably wondering how much I'm going to charge you for doing this. And I wanted to let you know, what if I told you that you are going to be able to use money that you're already spending, and we're going to be able to do all of this inside of the budget you already have? See, I learned a long time ago that I can't come in and lay out my value proposition and then give you another expense on your income statement. I know that that's not going to work for me. But what I can do is I can take your insurance transaction, which we have already established is viewed as a commoditized shuffling of paperwork. We view that as the funding mechanism to really buy our value proposition. We're going to show you how you can take money you've already been spending, just reallocate it to a different firm. We'll go ahead and handle the insurance placement and do that. That's the easy part. And you're actually buying everything I've spent the last 45 minutes talking to you about.
Right. Yeah.
It's like taking candy from a baby.
Yeah. And it is surprising that there are not more agents doing that. And I think to make, maybe to circle back on the whole prospecting marketing part of it is, a lot of the, you were just saying it, David, a lot of the conversation it has nothing to do with insurance. And I think that's a big mistake people make in their online presence, their digital presence. They focus on having insurance content. I think there needs to be more of a focus on business challenge content, because, clients aren't sitting around thinking about insurance problems until it is an insurance problem, but they face business problems each and every day, whether it's training their staff, keeping their staff motivated, being productive, following those safety guidelines, all those, or it's cash flow. And, right now certainly is king. And I think you need to talk about the things that are on the minds of your potential clients or your clients, the things that they struggle with, and then put them into an insurance or a risk management perspective. That's what they're looking for. That's when you're really adding some value to them, instead of, monkeys can do insurance quotes. But to add some real value, you need to talk about the same stuff that their attorney or their CPA is going to have the same conversations with them about. And those are business related problems.
I think that a lot of times people they overcomplicate what we do, right? I mean, or they're so focused on getting to the sale that they completely miss everything else in the process. And, listen, I've never had a problem getting a business owner to open up and tell me their story. Most business owners really like to talk about their business. Doing that.
If you ask them, hey, tell me about your business. Tell me about how you kind of look around and you say, man, you just really have a fascinating operation here. I love what you're doing here. It looks like people are productive. Tell me how you put this whole thing together. They're often running for a half an hour or an hour on that conversation, and you can't stop them.
Yeah, 9 times out of 10, I begin talking to them about, what, I really like your branding. Tell me how you got to this, and tell me how you got to where you're at in your marketing. I think it's fantastic. Yeah. Or if they're not doing something and I think I have a good idea, I will gently mention, hey, have you ever thought about doing something like this? I think this would play really well. If you go in and you talk to somebody about their business and let them tell you how proud they are of it, and you actually show a genuine interest in showing them a way to help grow their top line, in addition to as opposed to asking them for money to buy from you, you're going to win them over very, very early.
Yeah, I think that's kind of one of the criteria of being a great producer. You need to be curious and fascinated about businesses, about how they work and their stories. You really have to have that, because if not, you're just a transactional guy. If you're not really passionate about learning about business and helping those businesses, what are you really doing?
Yeah, well, and my thing is, there is zero excuse for not being able to do that. There's none.
Yeah.
That goes back to what you said originally, purely lazy.
Yeah.
I wish, I still come from the era. I'm not ancient, but the internet was pretty much evolving as I went to college. So I didn't have the internet at my fingertips. And in my first real outside sales job, we had the Kohl's directory, but it was like the actual leather bound Kohl's directory, And so it wasn't in insurance. It was in a different industry, but I actually went out and I used that and I created a sales system around the information that was given to me. Today, if you can't find common ground with a prospect within a minute, if not even less, you have done zero research before you've walked in, because these people's lives are on display for you all over the place. You just have to be willing to look for it.
There's so much information. And I know you said it in your 2-minute book. You need to be willing to do the research on your potential clients. And I think few people do that, to really dig in and find out, and that information is out there. It's online. It's whether it's on LinkedIn, whether it's on Facebook, whether it's on YouTube, it's somewhere online where you can get insights onto, what's happening in that business. What are the people behind the business? What are they about? So you can really dig into that. And there's really no reason any longer to make a cold call. Those days are over. If you're just, blindly calling people, hoping that you can land a meeting, you're doing it wrong.
Completely wrong. And, the thing is, I think it's it's a slippery slope that you get into when you start doing the level of research that I do. I'm good with what I do because I understand how to use that information. What you don't do is a myriad of research and then walk in and vomit all of that information out when you walk in the meeting, because you are no longer a producer. You have become a stalker. And you have to be careful. The more you know about something, the really you have to be very guarded. It's good to have that information, but you have to mentally prepare yourself to not walk into the meeting with preconceived notions based off of what you found online. Use that information to formulate questions that will either confirm or disavow what your supposition is walking in, but don't walk in with already, pre-made assumptions as to what you're going to expect. But I think a lot of people do that because I hear it all the time. People say, it's really refreshing. You didn't walk in here and tell me what I needed. You actually listened to what's going on in my business and how it runs and everything else. The last 3 guys I talked to came in and told me that I was in trouble. My workers' comp was, screwed, and they had the right policy and the carrier and everything else. They said, how are you going to solve that problem? I said, I really don't view that as a problem. Your problem is not the placement of insurance. There's always a place to put that. Your problem is all of the things that are leading to the fact that we had to have this conversation to begin with.
Yeah. I think you're right. I think that's a great point. Is you have to be able to put it into the research has to be put into context, into part of building that relationship so that potential client can hear the message of what you're saying. And they hear the message when they say it. It's not you saying it. You need to have the right questions, the right insightful questions, so that it's their idea, not your idea, where they come to the conclusion to say, oh man, I've been doing this completely backwards all these years, and you've opened my eyes to this, and this just makes so much sense to change the way I'm handling this. Because ultimately, any insurance transaction or changing a client, we're talking about moving someone from the status quo. We're asking them to make a change. And so you can't force someone to make a change. They have to internalize making that change for their own benefit.
Yeah, I agree. It's interesting. So I want to talk about LinkedIn because that's where we met.
Yeah, we kind of got off track, but it was good stuff.
All good stuff. So, it's interesting. So again, if I were to give myself a pat on the back for any one thing that I'm really good at, it's recognizing an opportunity and seizing it when it presents itself in front of me initially. I make a lot of mistakes. I'm not saying that everything I touch turns to gold. It couldn't be further from the truth, but I'm quick to move. I'm also quick to cut bait and course correct if I feel like the decision I've made is not a good one. But I was a really, really early adopter of LinkedIn. I remember being on LinkedIn. I mean, and it's probably not as old as what LinkedIn itself is, but, back in, I want to say it was 04, 05.
Early 2000s.
Yeah. 04, 05, LinkedIn comes onto the scene, and I see at least it became more mainstream at that point. And I saw that, and I'm like, you know what? This is a tool. This is going to be something at some point that a lot of people are going to jump on. And I was really, really active in it. And then I got unactive in it for a little while, which was a huge mistake. And I'm more active now than I have been in a long time. But, I think it's a great platform, but like any other platform, it's like I always say, it's never the process. It's always the person. Mm-hmm. The platform is outstanding. How the person chooses to execute on that platform makes all the difference in the world.
Oh, absolutely. And you're right. It has changed a lot since the early 2000s. I was on it early on and didn't do very much with it because it was primarily just a recruiting tool for a lot of people, where people threw up their resumes and, the recruiters jumped on it. But since Microsoft bought LinkedIn, is really when it's changed the focus on it. Yeah, it's still a big tool for recruiters and job seekers, but it's opened up a whole avenue for people to use it as a platform to build relationships, whether it's with potential clients, existing clients, strategic partners. It's the biggest B2B network out there. And it's basically a big CRM that's updated in real time by people adding information, whether it's information on their profiles, job changes, posting content, whatever. And it's free is the other thing that's the good part of it. And it gives you opportunities to do a number of different things. You basically have the profile, which is your I guess sales page, landing page is the way to view that, where you're making it client focused, client based, and then you have the ability to create content on an ongoing basis, whether that's video, text, or long form articles. And plus you have the ability to direct message people, and you can direct message people with video, audio, or text. And so it's a great relationship building platform. And I think the thing that people get confused on LinkedIn is they view it as a broadcast platform and just to blow out messages. It doesn't work to do that because there's just too much noise online to do that anymore. But if you're using it as a relationship building platform to establish credibility, authority, and then start to build relationships with people through what you're posting and how you're messaging people, and you're pulling that into your, let's say, drop-in visits, emails, phone calls, it's just another touch to position you with that potential client or a strategic partner.
No, I agree. And I mean, I think it's important because so many people, we're all fighting an uphill battle with LinkedIn, unfortunately, with all of the automated bots and everything else that are out there now. I am notorious for just sawing somebody off at the knees. If they request to connect with me and the next thing I get is a, hey, David R., thanks for requesting to connect with me, blah, blah, blah. Nobody calls me David R. except for my mother, right? You know, first name, middle initial, but that's what's on my profile because my father's David E. Yeah. So we're both in the insurance industry. So I have, I put my middle initial in there. I know it's automated at that point. Yeah. Like I've literally just accepted a connection with you, and 30 seconds in, you're telling me all the reasons why you can help my business. You know nothing about me. You know nothing about my business. And it's funny because, I have people like this week, I've had a couple people come out and say, hey, just wondering if you need help with your social media marketing. I studied your profile. It's very impressive, blah, 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 blah. I write back, I'm like, you didn't study it thoroughly enough. If you did, you'd see that I own a marketing company, So what are you offering me? How are you really going to help me? And I think that we really need to be focused in our message. And one of the best ways that I have found, and I'm interested in your experience with this as well, one of the best ways I have found to get past that and show instant credibility with somebody that you're trying to talk to or that you'd like to connect with in a non-salesy way, whether it be a prospect or otherwise, is I'll send them a quick message, not 5 seconds after we connect, but at some point I'll send them the message and I'll immediately follow up with a LinkedIn voice message so that they realize this is a real person. They're not an automated bot. I probably can take this a little more seriously than I would otherwise. That has worked wonders for me. Yeah.
I think, again, to think about this, if you're a middle market producer, how many freaking prospects do you need in your pipeline realistically? You don't need thousands of them. You need a couple hundred of the right prospects. You need to be more focused on who you're building relationships with within your pipeline, instead of just spraying and praying out to 1,000 different or 2,000 different people. And so if you have that mindset, you're saying, well, geez, if I'm trying to build relationships with 100, 150, 200 people, why would I even think about using some type of automated bot? That just doesn't even make any sense at all. And I think you made a great point. If you can personalize in an audio message, a video message, I think that goes a long way because there's no denying that then that is a personalized message. The other thing to look at as far as messaging, I view LinkedIn messaging almost like texting. It's not where you're doing formal, sentences and paragraphs and a formal interaction, but you're trying to get people to converse on the LinkedIn platform, which ultimately leads to say, geez, we've been going back and forth here on LinkedIn. Why don't we just hop on a call and see if, what we're all about and see if we're a fit to work together. It just becomes a natural progression at that point. And people are used to texting on the phone. And a lot of times, people, you looked at LinkedIn usually on your mobile phone. You're not going to look at a long message, a long email message. It's that quick back and forth. That's what you want to try to get to. You're trying to get the back and forth interaction where people are engaged, and then you can take the conversation off of LinkedIn. That's the goal of what you want to do.
Yeah, no, I agree with that completely. And, it's interesting because I think, again, to your point about broadcasting, I have a friend that is heavily involved in social marketing, and his comment was, it's like you're shouting, right? You're shouting at your audience. You're screaming at them what you want them to hear. You're not paying attention to what they want to receive. And it's interesting to me. I mean, as I'm sure you figured out, I'm a huge fan of video. Yeah. I'm a huge fan of video because it makes me a person. People, it blows my mind. I get approached by people when I go to different industry conferences, and they're like, "Hey man, how's it going?" And I'm like, I don't have a clue.
It's like they know you.
Who this person is, and they're like, I feel like I've known you forever, and da 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 da. And I mean, it's a really cool phenomenon, and it works. We try in our agency, we try to leverage video as much as humanly possible, because a lot of the time, even with a service person, my client may never meet that person face to face, but they're talking to them on the phone all the time. So when we onboard a new client, I want to get a video of the client concierge that is assigned to that account in front of that new client as quickly as possible, so they can see a name and associate a name and a face and a voice, and it makes it a personal relationship. And I think so many times in the digital age, we're focused on just boom, boom, boom. Everything's, done online or on the computer, that we're not slowing down and realizing we've been given tools to create a personal relationship on a digital platform.
Yeah, I think it's, you made a point about the broadcasting. I think if you get in broadcast mode, and we talked about this a little bit earlier about being able to position as that authority on the same level as the CPA or the attorney. But if your mode is to broadcast, you kind of destroy that positioning as an authority. You look desperate. And because the CPA that's advising people or attorneys, they're not broadcasting crap out to their audience. They just aren't doing that. And so why would you do that? If you want to be a trusted advisor to your clients, it's the wrong positioning. It's the same as just picking up the phone book and cold calling people. It's just the wrong positioning for the relationship you're trying to have with that particular client. And and I think video is a great way to make the people that are interacting with that client, because we do business with people. We don't do business with businesses. You want to make that connection on a personal level as much as possible, because then it becomes real. And there's a relationship there. There's a bond there that, especially now, since we haven't been able to do face-to-face, it's even more important than ever. And I think it's going to continue, because I think more and more people are realizing, hey, it's a comfortable way to do business. It's an inexpensive and a time-saving way to do business instead of driving across town and blowing an hour each way to meet with a client. And I know you said it before, I think in one of your podcasts, you give them the list of recommendations or the next steps or whatever in a video, they can view it on their own time frame whenever they want, instead of interrupting and scheduling a separate meeting right in the middle of their business day when they're busy doing their business. And maybe they don't want to meet with their insurance guy then. So,
well, I think part of it too is it's a change of mindset for us, right? I'm still somewhat old school in that I want to go wear a suit and tie and meet somebody in their conference room and shake their hand when I ask for their money. That's not the way that the generation that's coming through the ranks now thinks. And we need to transform the way we think to deliver the message to people the way they wish to receive it, not how we perceive they need to hear it from us.
Yeah.
And we've been doing video proposals for insurance for 2 or 3 years now.
Yeah.
We had to make zero adjustments when COVID hit because we've already been doing that. I've sold deals at 2:00 in the morning because I sent a video proposal and somebody clicked the button that said, I want to go ahead and request to bind this proposal on a couple $100,000 deal.
That's just so cool to be able to do that. To me, that's a neat way to do business because it's just so time efficient for both you and for the client.
It's huge. They can take the time to focus on what it is. They can select that. They know it's sitting in their inbox, but they don't feel pressured to watch the whole video right now. Let me go home, get my shoes off, grab a cup of coffee, whatever, sit down, watch this thing when I have time to really concentrate on what they're saying. And I mean, it's a huge advantage if you're already in that arena. It's interesting because the other thing that you mentioned is just sort of getting up and grandstanding. I don't remember the exact word you used, but I have been a very open critic of how a lot of people have used LinkedIn and any other platform for that matter during COVID to just spout off COVID information
It's just
continuously. And it's like you guys are missing a massive opportunity. You're spending all your time to try and look like a thought leader on something that people who have gone to medical school don't even really fully understand or can get their arms around, instead of stepping back and saying, what are the problems that I solve all the time that I can generate more content around that is going to pay dividends for me for years into the future, as opposed to something that hopefully will be irrelevant in several months because nobody's going to care anymore. Nobody's going to care about that. And it's interesting. The only thing that I have had I've said a couple of things in videos regarding what I think agencies should be looking at during COVID from a content production standpoint and everything else. The only thing that we did surrounding COVID is when I heard that they were going to do the payroll protection program loans, I literally sat up in bed and I said, I've got to make this happen for my clients and I've got to make it available for my prospects. And I got to the office. I called the CEO of a local community bank that I'm friends with. And I said, I need you and a couple of your SBA lenders on a webinar in a day and a half. And we're going to do it at Wednesday or Thursday at 2:00 because I need them to answer questions. I want all of my clients to get on there and be able to get their questions answered. I'm going to bring some prospects on. I'm not asking for anything out of it. I'll give you the platform. I'll populate it. All I need you guys to do is come on and be the subject matter experts to be able to answer questions. We conducted the webinar. It was a huge win. My clients that were on there ended up getting their loans processed through my friend's bank in an extremely efficient manner. The bank picked up millions of dollars worth of receipts of deposits because these people moved their accounts based on how nimbly they handled the PPP program. And you know what? I got credibility. Because I wasn't selfish. I found people who needed money and I found the people who had the money. And all I did was connect the two of them. We recorded the webinar. We created a landing page. We put some display and search ads around it. We drove traffic to that. We gained all kinds of registrations for people who watched it after the fact. And guess what? My CRM blew up. My HubSpot is full of leads that came through that program, right? Yeah. And, that's the only thing we did, but it was because we truly were meeting a need that was immediate for anybody who had that need. And it wasn't about just standing up, beating our chest saying, hey, I'm Captain COVID and I'm here with your daily announcement.
Yeah, it's the idea of solving that bleeding neck problem, and that for these businesses that was a bleeding neck problem, and you use the platform for what it was intended to do, to bring relationships together and help to solve a problem, rather than going back where a lot of people are just they're in that broadcast mode, just adding to the noise, regurgitating all this COVID stuff, whether it's from a carrier, whether it's from Wave that they put something together or whatever. And it's just, I think people are just brain dead to it. I know I am. I don't even want to see it anymore.
I mean, you hear about it on the news, the radio, everywhere you turn.
I ignore it, because there's so much misinformation. I don't know what in the hell's true or not.
Yeah, you go to LinkedIn. That's the last thing I want to see. Yeah. I've already heard it all morning before I got to work to jump on. So let me ask you this: if you're going to engage with somebody and they're not familiar with LinkedIn, what are the top 3 tips that you would give them for a LinkedIn newbie, or for somebody who maybe thinks they're using it right and they're not? What are 3 things anybody can do to set themselves on the right course?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think, first of all, you really need to think about, and I know you've talked about this, you really need to think about who your target clients are, your perfect fit clients. Who are you really trying to do business with? Who are those people that you want to build your book of business around? Because if you're just a generalist, you're just not going to get traction on LinkedIn. Your message is going to be that same general message that everyone else is saying. So I think you really need to plant your flag in a target market. Doesn't mean that you can't write business in other markets, but your focus, your positioning needs to be in a target market. You need to commit to that. And then from there, you need to build your profile around that target market to make it client facing towards that market, towards their problems, giving a little bit of a hint as to your solutions, your process. You can't give them the whole story. You want them to be curious enough that they are willing and want to talk to you. You don't give them the whole, we talked about this earlier about, you just don't throw up everything that you know. But you want to make them curious enough that they seek you out. And then finally, whether you're engaging on messaging or you're doing posts, make it original, make it unique, make it personal. Don't just share links out. Add some insights. Make it something that's of value to your potential clients or to those potential prospects that you're communicating with one-on-one. There's just the opportunity to do that. Yeah, it takes some more work to do that, but that's where the payoff is.
Yeah, I agree. So I'm going to give you my 3. And now people are going to have 6 points because my 3 are completely different than Walt's. And I'm not saying his are wrong and mine are right or vice versa, because there's so many things that need to be done.
Yeah.
Right. So my first one is make sure your profile is complete. Make sure you have a good profile that states exactly what you do, what problem you solve, whatever it is. Because what I can promise you is, whether you realize this or not, people are looking at your profile and they're doing that before they pick up the phone to call you or send you an email to engage with you.
Yeah, everyone's going to check out if you get introduced to anyone nowadays, you call them, you meet them at a meeting, you get referred into them. Everyone is going to do a search on you, and your LinkedIn profile is going to pop up in search.
And it's embarrassing if you get on there and you've got no profile picture. You have the grayed out profile picture and your job history doesn't really lend any credibility to what you're doing now or whatever else. So that's number 1.
Well, I'm going to just make a point in that is if your profile isn't up to speed and people are searching on your profile to figure out whether they want to do business with you, you really have no idea how many opportunities you're truly missing. You just don't know. You have business that's slipping out of your hands every single day if your profile isn't up to speed. That's how important it is.
Yeah, and I would also argue the fact that, I just lost my train of thought.
Was it that mine was so good or what?
I don't know. I completely spaced there for a second. It'll come back to me in a minute. But,
yeah.
It's interesting. I know what it was. There's no excuse.
Yeah.
On LinkedIn, there's no excuse because they give you a progress bar that tells you how what percentage to being a great link. They rate you, they superstar, whatever it is. Strive to get it complete based on how they set it, how they have everything, rated for you. The second one I would say is do not over engage with people, right? Don't over engage. That's weird. Like, I know who the people are that are in my pipeline that I am sitting back and engaging with on a very selected basis. Mm-hmm. If they post something great about their company, I'm going to give them a comment that lets them know, hey, good job. This is awesome. Way to go, team, whatever else. And then I'll let it rest. I'm not going to be living on their profile every single day, multiple times a day, every time they post something, liking, commenting, whatever else. It's weird. People don't, people are going to wonder, who is this guy? It's not going to be for the right reasons.
Yeah, you end up being the stalker at that point, and that's just creepy.
Yeah. And then the third thing that I would tell everybody is share other people's stuff.
Yeah.
There's a lot of information out there. You don't have to limit it to just what you want to share that is your own. Share other people's things too. You never know. I could share an article that somebody else wrote about a problem, and the person's not even going to realize it was the one who wrote the article. They're like, wow, this guy, thanks for sharing this. I really appreciate it. I got a lot from it. Boom, now you have interaction with somebody. Even though you didn't write it, they commented on it that you helped them, and you can engage with them at that point and begin the dialogue. So it doesn't always have to be about you and your thought process and your stuff. Share other people's things, cultivate information, and put it out there. I mean,
I think that's really smart, and especially if it's voices. Let's say it's a market. Let's say it's contractors that you're working with. There's certain people within that construction business, depending on where they're operating, that they view and they trust those voices. And so why not share information that they're already trusting and reading and probably consuming, but adding your insight. And it takes a minute or two to add your insight to information that they already trust, to put it into some type of perspective that leads into how you can help them to solve a problem that you solve.
I agree. Well, listen, man, we are popping an hour. Yeah. I want you to, this is your infomercial. Tell them how they can find you, what problem you can solve for them. And I want you to be able to have some of the people that listen to what we have to say reach out to you as a result of this conversation. I think that we've talked about a lot of good stuff, man.
Yeah.
I mean,
we did.
It's been great.
So, certainly you can find me on LinkedIn. Just do a search under Walt Goshert. And another tip here, my LinkedIn URL is commercial insurance prospecting. So you don't have to use your own name in your LinkedIn URL. So that's just a freebie tip. You can have it a keyword if it's available. And so you can find me on LinkedIn, certainly. My website is waltgoshert.com, first and last name. And that takes you right to a landing page for a LinkedIn profile scorecard where you can score every element within your LinkedIn profile to see, hey, what's working, what isn't working within your LinkedIn profile. And I also do a one-on-one service to help people one-on-one to beef up their LinkedIn profile. And I call it Prospecting Playbook. We'll rewrite, tear down everything on your profile. We'll look at the strategy, your messaging, everything there. And we'll also put together a written prospecting playbook to say, okay, now that you have a beefed up profile, how do you really make this thing happen? How do you mix in email? How do you mix in phone calls, maybe even direct mail into what your LinkedIn activities are? Because it's not just LinkedIn alone. It's part of having a prospecting habit. And I think everyone needs to have a prospecting habit and a prospecting process that you religiously follow each and every day.
I agree. And I would have been very disappointed if you didn't tell them to find you on LinkedIn first.
Yeah.
Well, listen, Walt, it's been a pleasure, man. I'm glad we finally got to connect. It's funny because I was telling Ryan Hanley that every morning I wake up and I'll post like a thing that I do on Canva or whatever else, they may have a quote or a saying, or it'll be one of our videos on, just a quick couple minutes on sales technique or thought process or whatever else. And beyond a shadow of a doubt, Walt is always the first one to be on there and engage with me. So it's very much appreciated. And so much so that last week when I was talking to Hanley, I'm like, hey, man, I know Walt. Is everything okay with him? Because it was like 2 or 3 days in a row and Walt didn't interact with anything that I posted. And I was wondering if something was wrong. So,
yeah, I was doing a series of workshops with the Institute of Work Comp Professionals and just really tied up with that. And I did, it's funny. I've hopped on this call with you. I did a call with Michael Jans. I did a panel discussion with Ryan and Billy Williams, Charles Specht, and Mick Hunt. And so all of a sudden I'm getting all these requests to be on podcasts or video things. And it's been good, because it helps to spread the word out there. So, yeah.
Ladies and gentlemen, if you don't believe that LinkedIn engagement works, that is 100% the reason that I had my guest on here today. He reached out to me originally to connect. We connected. He's engaged with my content, and I wanted to hear more about what he does. If that's the result you want, you need to call this guy and have him help you if you're not getting those results right now. Walt, it's been awesome having you on, man.
I want to say one last word
Sure.
And a plug for you. Grab David's 2-minute book. It's a quick read, but there's great insights in that book. And it really reflects on a lot of the topics that we talked about here today. And every producer needs to read through that book.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And it's humbling to know that you read it before we got on here, because guess what? I'm the author and I don't even have a copy yet. Everybody else is getting them before I've gotten mine. So it's good to hear who's read it.
I'm a Kindle guy. I'm trying to get rid of all this stuff behind me.
I hear you.
I keep donating books to the local library and trying to make everything on Kindle so that when I travel, it's with me. So
there you go.
Yeah.
Walt, I hope you have a good rest of the week, man. Thanks again for coming on. Everybody reach out to Walt if you need help on LinkedIn, because he's the guy who can help you.
You've been listening to the Power Producers Podcast. You can follow Killing Commercial Insurance on Facebook and YouTube. And if you want to take your game to the next level, check out our book, The Extra 2 Minutes, and our website, killingcommercial.com.